everybody. My name is Yonatan Zamir. I am the Vice Chairman of the Town of Woodbridge Planning and Zoning Commission, and this is a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission here in the Town of Woodbridge. We're joined by Chris Sullivan, who is our staff person, as well as other members of the commission, Kathleen Hunter, Aaron Hoffman, Jeff Kennedy, and Andrew Skolnick. I believe we're expecting at least 2 other members to join us tonight. The purpose of the meeting is to hear a presentation and also have a question and answer session with representatives of SLR International Corporation. They are a firm that has presented a proposal to the town to update our Town Plan of Conservation and Development, the POCD, which is a requirement in state law. And then after that is concluded, we will potentially take appropriate action to recommend to the Board of Selectmen regarding engaging SLR International as our consultant for the update that we need to do to the Plan of Conservation and Development. So without further ado, gentlemen, if you could please introduce yourselves. Thank you.
I am Vince McDermott. Been part of Mylona McBroom, which was the predecessor to SLR from its very beginning. And so I am here as a senior advisor, but as the senior person, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Robert Collins. And this is the person who you will really need to pay attention to. Briefly, for those of you who may not recall, we have done work for the town. And, our former colleague, Rebecca Auger, who now works for the State Office of Policy Management, worked with your board, your commission, when you adopted your current Plan of Conservation and Development. Unfortunately, we lost her. The public gained a great person as a planner. So we hope to pick up from where we left off. SLR acquired Mylona McBroom about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago. They're an international corporation. We have offices in every continent in the world. But the good thing is that our unit, when we got acquired, remains intact for the most part. We still have our 3 Connecticut offices, as well as offices in the rest of New England, just as we had prior to the acquisition. So some of the faces are different. And Robert's been with us 3 years now, I believe. And we have the good fortune of having a great planner with a lot of experience, and this is the person I'm going to turn this presentation over to. I learned a long time ago that the sign of a good leader is to hire better people. And so I had the good fortune of hiring Robert to work with us.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Am I
Sure.
picking up okay? If I stand maybe closer to this, is that okay? I'm Robert Collins, as Vince indicated, and I'm the proposed project manager that would be coordinating, updating the POCD with you all. And I'm excited tonight to kind of go through a little bit about our process, our schedule, our scope of services at the recommendation of Chris Sullivan. So to start out with, I just want to kind of start with like who the planning team is, so you'll kind of know who some of us that you'll be working with are. Obviously, you've met myself as well as Vince, who's our senior advisor, but also as part of our greater planning team is Nina Peet, who is actually our planning manager or planning director that oversees everything. She unfortunately was not able to be here tonight, but she will be participating, and kind of guiding me as needed throughout the process. Also part of our team is Julia Fiore, who is also an AICP planner. She's our senior economist and planner that can work on not only generalist planning type of activities, but also focus on any kind of economic goals and strategies that we might start to develop for the update. And then also on our team is Taylor Daigle, who is really a crucial part of the team. She is our staff planner, or our project planner, that will really be taking a deeper dive into looking at the community profile, working with you on the community survey, and then also helping me throughout the process to develop like goals and strategies and things like that. Also, just to kind of show you our org chart that was in the overall RFP that we gave you, you can see that the middle group is the group that I've already talked about, which is the planners. But also at our disposal, we're very fortunate within the company, so we don't have to, coordinate with a sub-consultant or something like that. We have subject matter experts that we can turn to as well. We have Holly Parker, that's part of our greater team, that is a Connecticut expert on active mobility and also transportation planner. We also have Jason Williams in the landscape architecture team, as well as Samantha Stewart. Some of you may already be familiar with Jason and his work. He worked on the connectivity, the business district connectivity study. And we're very fortunate to have him as a resource and somebody that we can coordinate with and can participate with. We also have civil engineers that we can team with related to infrastructure items or roadway types of things that might be desired within the POCD as goals and strategies. And then lastly, we also have a team of climate resilient and sustainability planners led by Noah Slovin right now, and we coordinate with them quite regularly on climate resilience and those types of subjects that are becoming very crucial for a POCD update. Just a little bit real quickly on some of our experience, and as I know many of you already know, and as Vince already mentioned, we did your previous or your existing POCD, so we have kind of like that document already in place, and we know there's a lot of good stuff that's in that will be moving forward, but we do want to take a fresh look and approach, guided by your your ideas and your feelings on this. But we have been continuing to stay very active in the state of Connecticut on working on other communities' POCDs, kind of staying up to speed on what the current trends are and things like that. Right now, I'm currently the project manager on the Prospect and the Beacon Falls POCD updates, which are neighboring communities. We also recently have just gotten the Cromwell POCD adopted. I worked on Southbury last year. We're also working on New Canaans right now. Our greater team also has a lot of other type of projects that we work on. As I mentioned, the business district connectivity study, which came out of with Jason Williams' shop, our urban design team, but it was also connected with transportation. Our team has also worked on the climate change vulnerability index for the state, which is a very crucial piece of information that we can use to tag into on identifying climate vulnerabilities. Holly Parker, part of our team, also worked on the Yukon Active Transportation Plan. And then also going back a couple years, we also worked on over almost 20 different affordable housing plans for the state. So we've become subject matter experts on Connecticut affordable housing plans and goals and strategies and things like that. So that's a little bit of kind of our background and what we've been working on since we worked with you last time. In getting ready for talking with you and submitting the RFP, we took a really close look at some of the priorities that you identified in your RFP, as well as our local knowledge that we had. And we know that some of the things that we know are going to be very important for you that we're going to carry forward into the POCD and make sure that those types of initiatives are clearly linked within the POCD. A couple of those items include the 2030 Task Force. We know that they're working on trying to get the business district to be growing and sustaining an economic development plan for the business district. We know that the connectivity study was part of their work, and we look forward to coordinating with you and finding out other ways that we can carry forward important recommendations or ideas that the task force has and making sure that they carry forward into the POCD. Our understanding also is that you've set up a housing committee that's taking a look at, that's following up on the affordable housing plan from a couple years ago, and is taking a look at ways to try to encourage housing options and renewed options as well as affordability. That's also a very crucial piece for POCD. Housing is always a major subject. So things that you would like us to coordinate with them or bring forward from them and place into the POCD will be very important. The Conservation Commission is actively working on protecting the 25% of your land that's protected open space already. making sure that the POCD continues to follow along with those kind of recommendations, but also looking for those, how can you preserve and protect that open space and maintain it, but also where are some development opportunities, keeping that right balance. And then lastly, we know it's important for Woodbridge, but we also know that these are issues that are pretty much uniform across the state, with communities wanting to maintain the balance of quality of life, but also finding ways to increase economic vitality and also retaining those unique features that a community might have, whether they're historical, cultural, good schools, things like that. We want to make sure that those types of things continue to be maintained and carried forward. And then lastly, the most current subject that most communities are really eager to embed into their POCDs are items related to sustainability and energy efficiency and becoming more resilient to changing environmental conditions. This is something that we have worked very closely with many communities, especially through our climate resilience team, and we're really well prepared to work with you to find those unique sustainability and resilience type of measures that you want to put into your POCD for the next 10 years. So what we know when we're preparing a POCD, the keys to success are, first of all, partnering with you all, the town staff as well, and then any other stakeholders. We know that that's very crucial because we have to make sure that everybody that needs to be involved feels like they've been a part of the process. And that's from the town staff and government and boards and things like that. But also we want to make sure that, and what's really important for a POCD is that we have an inclusive and innovative community engagement, so we can try to bring as much community involvement from young adults to seniors, and make sure that that's embedded throughout the process and that they're given an opportunity. We utilize a multidisciplinary approach, which I've already mentioned with our subject matter experts, but we find that having that at our disposal is very crucial to making sure that we come up with the best strategies and action steps to meet your needs and desires. And then lastly, those ideas and strategies that we come up with, we got to make sure that they're actionable and that they're implementable, so that the plan doesn't just sit on the shelf for the next 10 years, that there's actually very specific action steps that can be taken, whether it's going for grant funding for a project and the state requires you to have that linkage in your POCD. We'll work with you very carefully and also make sure that there's an implementation table to kind of help spearhead the implementation over the next 10 years. Our specific approach for you as the guiding commission is that we're going to provide you with technical data and analysis and skills needed to ensure that you all have the right decision, have the right information at your disposal so that you can make the right decisions moving forward in the POCD. We're going to build on the existing documents that we've already kind of talked about in the existing POCD, but we also want to look for those new planning initiatives and new directions that might be desired to be embedded. We're going to help you identify gaps in desired focus areas so that we can focus on the most important things for the next 10 years. Engage the community, as I've already mentioned. Then with everything that we've heard from you and the community, we want to help craft a vision statement for the plan that will set the tone for the update as well as for the next 10 years. And then start to identify the theme areas, the goals and strategies and action steps to meet that vision. And then lastly, we want to make sure that the document that we deliver to you at the end is very user-friendly and it's dynamic and it's actionable. The specific process that we'll take you through during the process is that we'll start out with, we have 5 basic tasks, but there's a 6th task that's throughout the process, and that's really the community engagement or collaboration. That's running throughout. But we start out with a baseline review, we have a kickoff meeting with you, and then we start to gather the documents and things that Chris will give us, as well as any other plans that you want us to take a look at, as well as state statutes and documents, and we'll do a baseline review and share that with you. We will then move into the community profile and developing the existing conditions, where we'll take a look at demographics over the last 10 years. We'll make some projections for the next 10 years so that you can start to make some, have good information to make some decisions. We also will, you know, analyze that and share that data with you and look for nuances within that data so that we know what, if we're focusing on the right subjects. Once that phase is kind of done, we then get into drafting the plan. And the drafting of the plan has two phases. The first one is developing that community vision statement carefully with you, figuring out what those theme areas will be, because we like to put the plan in today into like 3 or 4 major theme areas so that it's very easy to use. And then once we have that figured out and set up with you, we then follow through with developing the action steps that go with the goals and strategies under the themes, and then actually the text of the plan as well. That leads us then to the adoption phase, which includes the 65-day adoption period that the state requires us to go through. And then throughout, like I said, there's collaboration and public engagement. In the beginning, we do things like set up the project website or story map so that that's a kind of a hub for information. We have the community survey that we recommend. And then we have some workshops that are we're proposing too that are at crucial junctures in developing of the plan. Now the subjects that the state requires us to look at, but also I think we would want to do anyway, even because it's a long-range plan, is that we definitely have to look at demographics. We have to look at land use and zoning, because that's, a POCD is really a growth management or a conservation document. And so the land use and zoning is really one of the main focus. Housing is also a very important subject, obviously. Economic development and employment type of situations. Transportation and mobility, community services and infrastructure that the town has currently, and what might be planned for improvements over the next 10 years. Park and recreation and open space, which are part of community services, but it's always good to kind of call them out separately. Cultural and historic resources obviously come into play, and then environment, sustainability, and resilience, which is kind of the new subject that everybody's taking a look at when they update the POCDs. Taking a closer look at these, just to give you a flavor, and obviously I know with your existing POCD you're already might be somewhat aware, but when it comes to land use and zoning, the POCD guidance that we look for is that we look for things like zoning regulation consistency, like what is, what type of changes, if any, to your zoning map or zoning regulations are you looking for? And so we want to make sure that those types of strategies or action steps get embedded into the POCD so that those can be used then to potentially update your zoning regulations as the second step after the POCD is updated. So those are very crucial. We also want to make sure that we're aligning with those goals and initiatives of such things like the 2030 task force, the connectivity study, housing options and climate resilience. So we want to make sure that some of those new I'm forgetting initiatives is what I'm trying to say. We want to make sure that those new initiatives are being embedded into the POCD that maybe were different than where they were 10 years ago. But then also we want to make sure that existing resources that are very important to the town, we want to make sure that those are discussed, preserved, and promoted in the most appropriate way for where the town feels that they should be today. And with a lot of historic resources in the town, we want to make sure that that guidance is consistent with other boards and commissions, but are also on target where the town wants to be going. In addition to initiatives and goals that the town may have, there's also current planning trends that a lot of communities are considering that we can work with you on. Things like accessory dwelling units, which your housing committee might be talking about. We can explore some of those ideas with you and figure out if, putting in an action step to expand their promotion or to amend the zoning code is something that we can look at. Also, green technology and infrastructure, making sure that we are recommending that maybe the the zoning regulations incorporate those types of things so that you all will start to be leading the effort to build a more resilient and sustainable community going forward. Now with that, we're going to also talk about the business district connectivity study, and I'm going to turn it over just to give my voice a break for a second to Vince to talk a little bit about that.
In your last, in the existing POCD, there was a concentration and recommendations regarding economic development, particularly in your business area. You euphemistically called it a village district, which is really a business district. It's the heart of your economic generator. And you made some recommendations, and I think from that study, one of the recommendations was the connectivity study, which has been completed and is being implemented. That's been advanced, and you're looking for funds for construction. So that's some infrastructure in support of the economic development initiatives. You're not there yet. And so hopefully as part of this, if necessary, thinking of different ways for zoning. But with the infrastructure you put in place, you could do more. How much, and this is rhetorical, how much do you want to be the catalyst to continue to implement that? Because in the past, and I think correctly so, probably 95% of the community is residential, as it should be, based on what you now have and the natural resources that you have. So capitalizing on the investments, but the question we're going to challenge you with, do you want to be more aggressive in the intervention to make it happen? And I hate to use the word because it's not applicable, but in other communities, redevelopment. But more importantly, do you want to be a catalyst for development in that area to make sure it happens the way you want it to happen and be proactive? So we're going to, through this process, investigate that and lay the foundation through your 2030 committee, if you haven't already thought of those things. But the integration of the 2030 committee into this climate conservation development is important, because we go from your interest there to the VOCD implementation, and part of the implementation is some communities have worked through a municipal development corporation. I know in your last plan you talked about business improvement districts. Those sorts of things all have a place if you want to be proactive. So we'll work through those processes with you to incorporate them into the POC.
Great, thanks, Vince. Lastly, I just wanted to touch base a little bit on, the community engagement that we are, recommending for this study that we've laid out for you to consider, which we can adjust, depending on your actual desires. But as I mentioned earlier, we are proposing to have something that we call a story map, which is basically a project website, but a story map is run through, it's an Esri GIS ArcView document that makes it very easy for us to create and then to give you a link to and post on your website, so that we don't have to create like a separate domain name. And we can also update that regularly. And the community survey, which we're also proposing, could be easily reached through going to that story map. And we do have some examples. I'm not sure if you took a look at them, but you can take a look at the one for New Canaan and kind of see all the different type of stuff that we were able to include on that story map for the community to be able to, it's an information hub. As I mentioned, the community survey would also be a very crucial initial piece that we would work with you and get the word out to the community, so we could kind of take a pulse of where the community is on a variety of subjects for the POCD. We then we're recommending to have 2 open houses or workshops, one in the early stages to kind of introduce the project, but also to maybe discuss the community survey results with the public. And then in the later stages of the project, to review the goals and actions to get feedback before we kind of then complete the plan, to see if the public has any additional ideas for goals or actions that maybe we didn't think of that are appropriate. I usually recommend that these type of community events take the form of an open house because we find that we get greater attendance if it's an open house. And the difference is an open house might run from, say, like 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And people can drop in at any time during that period when it's convenient for them, as opposed to if it's a workshop and it starts at 7:30, and if you can't be there at 7:30, it doesn't follow through. So with the open house, people can come at 5 o'clock, and we have like 3 or 4 activities set up, and then they can, do their activities, and then they can leave if they want to leave quickly, or they can stay and talk with their friends and neighbors. We find that those type of open house activities, because people end up interacting and talking with each other, maybe with you might see your friends and neighbors, it becomes a more friendly and positive event, and then people usually leave with a positive feeling about it and that they participated. So we definitely encourage and recommend the use of an open house. Lastly, we also would be working obviously very closely with you all as the commission. And then in our schedule, we have proposed 5 meetings with you directly throughout the process. 1 at the kickoff stage, 3 during the development of the plan to kind of update you on the community profile would probably be 1, then the community vision would be another, and then probably the goals and strategies would be another. And then there's a 5th meeting that would happen right before the adoption phase would start, and that's where we come together and you all have had a chance to review the plan, and you decide whether you think it's substantially complete in order for it to go forward into the 65-day review period that the state requires. And then at the end of that review period would be then the formal public hearing. That's the normal process for updating the POCD. So with that, the reasons why we're hopeful that we can team with you is because we feel that we have the local knowledge and experience from our past history and recent work with Woodbridge. We're very people forward. We like to engage with the community as well as with the boards and commissions. We use innovative tools, especially since a lot of innovative tools are available to us today. And then lastly, we want to build commitments within the plan that we can help you move forward into for the next 10 years. So that concludes our formal presentation part of tonight. We're definitely ready and able to answer whatever questions that you might have. We do have some additional slides if you want to take a close look at the proposed schedule, as well as the proposed fee, and anything else that you might want to discuss. We're ready to respond to your questions.
Wonderful, thank you. Obviously, we've got 2 additional members who were able to join us, and so in case it wasn't clear, we're open for questions now for these consultants that we're potentially going to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. So, anybody has any questions? I'd open it up, obviously.
I just have a question because there's been some comments on the housing plan, and just for the record, I chair the housing committee for the town of Woodbridge, and some of the concerns were had to do with data that it seems to be outdated, because when they were doing the plan, it was like they were using like 2019, 2020 data, and that was pre-COVID, and because of COVID, there was, some of the demographics did change in the town, so they were concerned that there was going to be bad information feeding the POCD process, and I explained that you would, that any firm would be doing an update of the demographics. So I just want to confirm that that is the case, that the demographics will be updated, and you wouldn't be relying on old data from the housing plan. And so that's one question. And the second question was, in terms of a build-out analysis, because we had some changes in our zoning regulations a couple years ago that, would provide some minimal, affordable housing development. And they felt that there should be a build-out analysis actually before the POCD. And I said, no, that's something that your process would cover. You would be looking at the amended zoning regulations or any changes that took place over the past 10 years, and then you would be incorporating that into a build-out analysis.
Yeah, I guess let me start with your demographics question. So when we do the community profile, we will. Sure.
So you're not looking
at it. We do obviously pull the most recent census data that's available. We do go back to the 2020 census, even though there is some issues with it because of the time frame when it was done, because it is still considered the benchmark data. But since 2020, the U.S. Census, through the American Community Survey, which is their yearly 5-year estimates that they do, that they do a pretty substantial effort in making sure that there's data that's available every year. And I think right now, the 2022 data is what we're using. And as we move through this year, possibly in the next month or two, the 2023 data might come out. But most likely it would be the 2022 5-year American Community Survey data that we would be using as well. We would definitely use for like the total town's population, we would use the 2020 data as the benchmark, but we would not be using any data from the 2019 American Community Survey because there has been several more years that have come out. We will, we look at a variety of different types of data sources, things that come from the state, like the Department of Labor. Sometimes their data might be a year or two behind in reporting it, but we always bring forward the most current and available data. And with the affordable housing plan that you all did, obviously that's an institutional piece from that point, and we would only maybe pull out the recommendations on there, but not necessarily the data. And we would work very closely with you. Now, relating to the build-out analysis, that is something that we can do depending on the level. Obviously a more simplified, comparing the zoning with what's built and like what's vacant, that can be done. One thing is that, the SCROG is actually going to be, doing the GIS and the mapping for this project, and we will be coordinating with them. If we had to do some kind of build-out analysis, we would have to coordinate that with them because they would be having to supply the map layers and things like that. But that's something that we could work out and make sure that we have a conversation with you all, with them, to make sure that they can supply us the data, and then we could do the analysis.
Because I did see like your last plan did have a general build-out analysis.
Right, and I think that was generalized based on the, the zoning layer, existing land use, developable land, and then, that's vacant, and then seeing, what that could actually, what the capacity is for that. But like I said, we would have to coordinate that, at least the mapping and the GIS tools, with SCROG.
Just so everyone understands, given your limited resources for this, we would rely, as Robert has just said, we're not generating new maps. They would be working with and analyzing existing data through SCROG. That's normally an expensive thing. Why reinvent the wheel when they have that database and you just build on that database? I often wonder, build-out analyses help give you some direction as to what the art of the possible is, but having been working in this field for many, many years, I think there are more important aspects of your POCD that you should be concerned with. Build-out is somewhat of aspirational and really doesn't come to fruition. It gives you some guidance, but my experience, it helps, but it's not there are more important aspects of community planning that would be more beneficial to you.
Yes.
I
Totally
just want to
agree.
be sure that our audio team can hear you. He's right. His audio is okay. Like you guys can hear him okay. Can you speak?
Okay,
Just-
I will talk
Maybe
more
we
loudly.
can. Maybe we can sort of center that between
Okay.
you. Yeah, I'm just thinking
Sure.
about the folks at home watching and stuff. Sometimes when meetings like this, people want to like tune in and they can turn it all the way up. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
I wanted-
Let
I wanted-
me- excuse me. On your current build-out analysis, they went through the right steps.
Right.
They considered the right things, the natural resource constraints that are all over your town, the soils, the floodplains, the watersheds, and so on. And given the your residential, predominance of your residential zoning in town, it's pretty simple to do. And so I don't know, unless there were really radical changes, I don't know that the density and the build-out is going to be significant enough to influence other policies.
Yeah, well, there is one particular change, is that the allowance of multifamily housing on land that's served by public water, public sewer, that is not in the, water supply watershed, of which, maybe 1.6% of the land fits that category. But, if you had like 100 acres that did fit that,
That would be worth updating from that
right,
perspective.
and
Right.
if you're allowing 15 units per acre in that type of situation, I mean, would you, I'm just
Yeah,
curious as to
yeah,
what the
yeah,
analysis would look like.
yeah. In that limited area, for sure, that would be worth the effort, because that is, in order to accomplish that, you would be certainly into the infrastructure to support that. Otherwise, you're relying on the on-site sewage disposal systems, which your soils have never been great in this from that perspective.
Another aspect of that too is that, the POCD is going to be, coordinated with you, and we're going to be making recommendations that you want to pursue in the POCD that may talk about multifamily opportunities, like maybe in the business district or something like that with mixed use.
Yeah.
But there are going to be recommendations. The zoning won't actually have been changed yet until sometime later. And so therefore, if we did a build-out analysis, it would be based on like where the zoning is now. So some of the build-out analysis that might lead to some of the, if you're, obviously in the housing committee and you're eager to find out these answers, would probably be, doing a study of, say the business district, of what like different zoning changes that could possibly happen, and then what type of density would get you. But that would be obviously like another type of study that the POCD could recommend. And we could even assist you with that, but I know right now, that's, we haven't taken that in consideration. I did want to also just mention, because this is a really good point, is that the fact that the mapping, the mapping being done by SCROG is actually a really good benefit for the town, because it's a service that they offer. We currently are working, as I mentioned, on the POCD update for the town of Prospect and Beacon Falls, and both of those towns are using NBCOG's GIS to prepare the maps that we're coordinating for their POCDs. And it is a really good cost savings, and we have, like for instance, with NBCOG, our interaction with them in developing the maps has been really good, and we're hoping obviously the same thing would be with SCROG. Okay. Any other specific questions?
I was actually kind of wondering about how, if you could speak a little bit to how other towns that you've worked with have, along the lines of housing and the intersection of housing and the climate, resilient sustainability question. I know that in our state, that's something that, the government is focused on at large, and I know that individual towns are thinking about it. Is there something that, just to sort of like, maybe as a kind of a teaser or just as an example, right? Like what other towns are thinking about doing? Is it possible to get a kind of a preview about that, right? Like when it comes to expanding the supply of housing in a way that is resilient for the climate. Obviously, what we heard and learned in the last few years, and certainly I as a member of this commission learned in the last few years, is while there have been some advancements and developments, significant ones regarding the use of septic systems, that are capable of sustaining a larger number of people in a small, sort of our classic single-family area. In connection with some of the changes that we made to our regulations to permit a slight expansion of affordable or I should say, expansion of housing, right? Ability to do a two-family as of right in certain areas of the town, for example. And connected with that, you always have the connection of the question of climate resiliency, which in many respects means how are you going to manage the disposal of waste and management of water resources, et cetera, outside of the protected areas for water supply, right? watershed. But I'm curious, as it relates to expanding the supply of housing, and I know this is, Commissioner Hunter's more of her purview, but it's something that I'm interested in as a member as well, is like, are there things that other towns are doing that you could suggest to us that might, in this process, that you could drop off the top of your head? I'm just sort of curious. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, if that's not something that you.
There's a couple different things in there.
That was a long
The,
question.
the issue with higher density, even localized higher density, as you pointed out, in Connecticut, as distinct from elsewhere in the country, where both of us have experience, is sewage disposal. The soils in Woodbridge are very tight. They're glacial till for the most part, except in fragile areas down in the floodplain areas, and down in the lower part where it's more sand and gravel, but for the most part, you're not able to get significantly higher densities in a conventional way. Even with the more advanced treatment, I don't use the term loosely, community sewage disposal systems are very challenging in Connecticut by virtue, while they're permitted, by virtue of the DEP deep process for analysis that one needs to go through to support the design of those septic systems. The other part that is challenging for communities is that unless you are going to want to get into the community sewage disposal management business, the developer is responsible for the construction, permitting construction and maintenance. But your community, through its Water Pollution Control Authority, and forgive me because I don't know that you have one, but if you don't,
It's a
then
New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority.
right, would then have to agree to take over those systems in the event of failure. So administratively, they're a challenge. I don't shy away from them. We've designed them successfully, but the process is time consuming. For example, if I were a developer and wanted to come before you sometime this year with an application before your commission, I better have my test pits lined up in the ground, monitored from now until June, or else you're not going to get a permit. So that's a challenge. So the communities that want to do that need to set up the structure and the processes, and that could be done. And I think if that's your approach, that's an admirable approach, but be prepared for the upfront administrative part of that to get you going. So that is one technique. The other technique that Robert has mentioned is in the areas where you do have sewer capability to allow mixed use, because you don't want to take away necessarily the opportunity for your economic development, because you don't have a large area for that. You don't want to take away that to devote it all to housing, because they are competing interests. But they need to be, if you look creatively at how that area in town gets developed. So my suggestion is that where you can increase density through your current infrastructure, great. The other areas you really need to be very careful about as to how you do it. I was involved in a study. I was a town planner many, many years ago in Woodbury, and we actually commissioned a study with the town of Southbury to look at that very question on where do you want those community systems to be, and allow that to dictate, rather than willy-nilly out in the hinterland, somebody saying, oh, I've got this piece of land that I'm going to go and try to increase my density through a community sewer system. So, again, there are competing interests, to be sure, but do you want to think about where you want those systems to be, so you still have an orderly plan in your community rather than a disjointed one by my saying, oh, I want to go here, he says, I want to go there, and take advantage of those regulations. So I think there's some forethought that needs to be part of this as to where the appropriate locations are. So that's, so I don't know if that answers your question, but it gives you some thoughts anyway. It's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. And I'm happy to hear that you're thinking in those terms as a planner, because other communities are shutting that off, just saying, oh, we don't want to be bothered.
I was just gonna also add, I mean, it is obviously a really challenging balancing act that every town is going through. But one of the things, like when we were working on actual affordable housing plans, which I know you already have one, and we would be working with the committee to bring those strategies forward and then maybe expand on them. So one of the things that we, like I would say from day one, we would go into a community is, yes, you have to be mindful of like what the state mandate is as far as like 830G concerns and having to, do the plan, which is 830J. But let's just focus on like what we think is, where is Woodbridge today with housing? Where is it that, like, what do we see in the demographics? Like, is it elderly or seniors wanting to stay, in place but maybe downsize from like a 5-bedroom house? Is it, a family that has a child that recently graduated from college and would like to live in town, but there's no like rental apartments and things like that? And when you do some of that analysis, what we have found in almost every town that we did an affordable housing plan is there was already a tremendous need, a very specific type of need within the town already. And because this first affordable housing plan that everybody prepared a couple years ago is for 5 years, let's try to start there. Let's start from where the town is and what the town needs right now. And then through looking at a variety of things like, again, I mentioned them early, the accessory dwelling units, ADUs, maybe two-family type of units, where there might be some multi-family options, that maybe can connect with existing systems or are appropriate for a community system. Let's look at those small baby steps. Let's start somewhere and start making some progress. Having to jump in and say, oh, we need, 400 units. Let's start with just a couple and then start to get the right units into the town and see what they are. And when we also always see about 12 different strategies when it comes to affordable housing, and 6 of them are really policy related or zoning related, I should say, and then the other 6 are policy related. The policy related ones fit very nicely into a POCD. They might be some different things that you want to consider, like a housing authority or different types of things like that. But then zoning related are, again, ADUs, looking at maybe loosening the regulations, but then making sure that there's design guidelines that go along with that, mixed use overlays, things like that. So there's a variety of different things, cluster development, that we can look at with you and also dissect with the housing committee, what's in your plan already, to make sure that gets carried forward.
I want to come back to your question about what other communities are doing, not necessarily related to housing, but to infrastructure in terms of green infrastructure. I'm reasonably comfortable saying that towns like Woodbridge are not embracing some of the newer technologies for infrastructure in terms of green streets. You have that opportunity down in Amity area. But the drainage, the stormwater management, and other techniques that are part of development, even conventional development, are probably not being employed, and they should be. And people call it low-impact development, but that's the planning side. The implementation side of that is the green infrastructure that accompanies or implements the LID policies. So we would certainly identify those that are appropriate as part of the resiliency.
complete streets
Complete
ideas
streets, yeah.
too. is
That-
another
that's what you're
thing
doing.
That also gets people becoming more energy efficient by trying to bike and
Right.
walk more and things like that.
Yeah. Your current plan addresses some of that. The connectivity study addressed that very specifically, but we would want to build on that and emphasize the importance of that.
So, in these POCDs that are done in Connecticut, how much consideration and analysis goes into the border towns that touch a town? Because a town's sort of like an island in these POCDs, right? So we have a number of towns that, border on our town. And how much analysis, if any, goes into understanding what people are doing in a little bit more of a geographic location? What are the trends with respect to that? What's the thinking on it? Or is it very self-contained in each town with these POCDs that are done?
Well, the easy answer to that is that the SCROG has the regional POCD. And so we have to make sure that your plan is consistent with that. And we also take a look at that plan to see, not only what they have laid out for Woodbridge, which, connects pretty easily or pretty closely with, with what you're desiring, but we can also take a look at what's going on in some of the neighboring towns. Through that type of process. If there's already, we can also make recommendations in the POCD on coordination. There's some towns that have, coordinate with, they might have a joint school district.
We do.
As we do here.
Like we do.
Yep,
yeah.
so we want to make sure that we're making sure that that coordination continues, or maybe make improvements where it might be needed. Some towns have share coordination in like utilities or other types of infrastructure, so we want to make sure. That's why, we want to talk with not only you, but internally we'll want to talk with various different staff like Public Works, making sure that all the linkages that we need to make sure are included in the PUCD are there. It's hard though to make like a recommendation for a neighboring town to do something different, but you could
Based on our
always put that-
POCD,
yeah, you could
right?
always put that into a policy, but it's really going to be a policy step, and but there's not going to be any way for you to really implement that if the other town is not.
So the POCD is a directional document towards where, as the thinking of a town, we want our policy to go in, right? Is that how
Right,
you would
it's a
describe? So
policy
it's a
document.
descriptive document first, right? And then it's like what direction the town wants to go in.
Right, it's a policy document. It's like the state establishes basically 2 growth management and conservation documents that all towns have to have. And the POCD is the policy document, and then the zoning regulations are the regulating part. And those, they go hand in hand. But it's important to note that the POCD is the long-range policy document.
In theory, if you look at general statutes of zoning, section 8-2, there is specific language as to the recommendations that your zoning regulations follow the POCD. I've always been curious as to why zoning comes in the statute structure, why the zoning comes before planning, but that's the way it works.
Thank you.
That's relatively new, the requirement that your zoning regulations take into account the recommendations of the POCD. There's some general language years ago, but more specifically, it's there now.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Does your fee include, I know it includes community outreach, is that the recommended amount of community outreach that is there?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we recommended from our experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was one of the things that why we want to talk with you and find out if there's other type of engagements.
Mhm.
Obviously, we could discuss that and we could, take something away or add to it. And, discuss with you if that impacts the fee or something like that. Obviously, we're really curious to hear from you. If there's other things that you'd like to do.
Based on the size of your community,
Mhm.
9,000 people, plus or minus, I think that's the right number.
Yeah.
Less than that, people might feel left out. And it's not
Yeah,
it doesn't become a community plan.
sure.
It becomes your plan instead of a community plan.
Hearing no other questions. Chris, are we actually doing taking an actual vote as regarding this, or are we just moving in a work session? Or how does it work?
Prefer us to leave, for you could, so you can deliberate, that's fine with us.
Well, you can
Well,
watch it
happy
on
to stay.
TV later.
Pardon?
You can watch it on TV later.
Actually, I did have just a quick question on the schedule, because I'm trying to, you know, see when this really needs to be pretty set. So it looks like you have 8 months to really put together. Sorry, I was just like, looking like if we start in April, looks like we need to have this done by the end of November. To
Yeah,
get the,
I guess that was one of the questions that I had was, is there a specific, because I don't think it was actually mentioned, it was a rough estimate, or mention of it, but we didn't know if there was an official date that you're targeting, or like when, because your current POCD, does it expire on like a very specific date?
well, I think it's
May
15th, 2025.
May 15th of this
No.
year?
Next year.
Oh, next year, okay. Yeah, so I think what we did is we've laid out a schedule. I feel that, you know, we could progress pretty quickly through, for 8 months, going through the process of, you know, having a kickoff meeting, setting up the community survey and the story map, having 2 workshops, and then coordinating with you with these other meetings. We feel that we could, we could progress through that pretty well through 8 months. But then we do have to allow approximately, 3 months or so for that adoption process, because it's mandated 65 days. So I think it's, if we kick this off relatively soon with that schedule, we would be looking at that, 12 months from now, like right around March, having like that formal public hearing to adopt it, which would be in advance of your May date. And there's a little bit of wiggle room there too. If some unknown circumstances happen to us, or happen in the process or something, or we decide that we need to take it slower, the state does have a process where you can send a letter to them, requesting an extension.
Okay.
The state is usually very agreeable to that as long as you're going through the process already. And if you have any grant applications that are pending that might need to see that, as long as you've sent that extension request letter in and it's on file with them, they're usually very comfortable with that.
Particularly since Rebecca Auger is the one who approves
Yeah.
those.
I know her.
We don't like to do that because statutorily, or I shouldn't say statutorily, but policy-wise by OPM, you really have to have a current POCD in order to obtain grants, infrastructure grants, roadway grants, lots of grants and the like. You really need to have it current. But they do grant exceptions, but you don't have to be in that position.
So being proactive and, where we stand today to when it's due, there's definitely plenty of time to go through the entire process and have it all adopted and complete before your May date of next year.
A motion.
Thank you. I guess the question is whether we should ask them, thank them for the presentation and ask them to, it doesn't seem necessary, but,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think they
Yeah.
can stay.
yeah.
You can go out and watch it on YouTube.
Yes. So I guess, I would entertain a motion at this moment for discussion as to regarding our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
Well, I'll make a motion to recommend to the Board of Selectmen retention of SR Consulting to work on the Town of Woodbridge's 2025 Plan of Conservation Development.
Second.
We have a second. Do we have discussion?
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Anybody have any?
Very comprehensive presentation. I feel like I understand the process a lot better than I did, an hour ago, so thank you.
Yeah, I think, we're on a very, very short timeline here. Not that but luckily we do, they are a very good planning consulting firm that has experience in our our last plan and has had some involvement with interconnectivity, so they're not starting from zero. So I think it would be a easier update with them doing this, so I feel comfortable in that, so I think it's a good thing.
I should have asked this, but clarifying how the Conservation Commission is involved in this process. Can I ask, turn to you? Yeah. No, okay, that's fine. Yeah,
As they did mention to you, they will be touching base with
yes, I kind
many,
of,
many different things with them.
okay.
Any other further discussion? Okay, I guess we can take a vote. All in favor of recommending?
We should just seat your
Sorry.
alternates.
Oh, yeah. Is everybody seated? Who's not seated?
Everyone's
Let's put it this way.
You need two to be seated. So you've got Aaron, Kathy, and Cindy.
Okay.
Dee, 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 dee.
Is there a preference? Does anybody? I'm just going by who was here. That's all. I guess you were last. No, yeah, no offense if that's okay. So Aaron Hoffman and Kathy Hunter be seated as our alternates. And with that, I think we could take a vote. All in favor of recommending SLR International Corporation as the Commission's consultant for the update of POCD, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, I think we're good.
Now you get to vote to adjourn.
Thanks for the vote of confidence.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
for your
presentation. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your time.
Be more soon.
Yeah. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this special meeting.
So moved.
All right, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you all very much.